All right, we have my audience and the fish. That's number 3. Here you go. And start. Okay. So stories about the limits of science and just how far it will go have entertained humanity for generations. We've had Icarus, Frankenstein, and even The Matrix. People like the idea of pushing the limits of science and just seeing that sometimes whether or not there's things we should do and shouldn't do. So this idea of curiosity satiation has been a major theme throughout human history, but some things are better left in the pages of a science fiction novel. One of this is human experimentation, just the idea of playing with humans and seeing with their minds and especially behavior. So the American Psychological Association has created a list of rules to help curb this curiosity, and they include things like having informed consent, debriefing the participants, protection from harm, confidentiality, and the right to withdraw. Now, there's a reason we have such rules in place, and the reason is that people have defied them in the past. So this speech is going to be about the most unethical social experiments in modern history. All right. First, we're going to start with the Milgram experiments, which were conducted in 1974. The Milgram experiments, he wanted to test just how far a person would go in obedience to what they perceived as an authority figure. So to test this, he would have a scientist and a volunteer walk into a room. They'd walk into the room with a table with a set of switches, each linked up to a different level of electricity. The volunteer was then told that there was a man on the other side of the wall, and that the teacher was supposed to ask them a series of questions. And with each question they got wrong, they were to flip the switch, which would shock the person on the other side. Now, this was good, and they would get up, they would say some right, some wrong, and they would flip the switch accordingly with each wrong answer. But it would get to the point where the person on the other side, an actor, would start screaming out in pain because the electricity was getting too high. And oftentimes the volunteer who did not know about the experiment, they would look over to the scientist and be like, he's in pain. And the scientist would say, just continue. And for the most part, they did. And the screams would get louder as the actor on the other side started banging and screaming and saying he wanted this to stop. But the volunteer would most likely continue in obedience to the scientist, up to the point where the actor on the other side of the wall would go silent because the electricity level, if it had been real, would have been fatal and should have actually been shocking the other person who would have died. Now, this is considered unethical for obviously many reasons, but one of the main things is that it had a lasting psychological trauma on the people who did this. Like, it's hard knowing that you have those inner demons and that they had the ability to kill somebody just because somebody else told them to. And most patients did it, and that's one of the reasons this is considered to be one of the most unethical, just the understanding that they would kill a man with orders too. All right. Now, the other one's a little bit more recent. This was in 1967 by a teacher at a Palo Alto high school. This is called the Wave Experiment by Ron Jones. This is just a regular science teacher, but he wanted to better understand, because he couldn't answer his students' questions as to why Germany fell under the Nazi regime so easily, how they were willing to comply with such strict orders and such harshness. So he turned his third period class into a regimen of socialism. He would give them tiny orders at first. He brought strict rules, and it was a bunch of things. He created He created a salute for their group where they would go like this, and he whipped them into almost a third regime. They started reporting on each other if anyone violated the rules, and other class members who weren't in the class, other students started joining just to follow his rules. And what started out as a simple little experiment the students started bullying one another, and they started putting pressure on others to join the group. The experiment actually only lasted 4 days because of this. And at the end, the only way he could break them up is he gathered everybody into a rally after we realized that it was all spinning out of control. So he gathered them into this rally saying that they actually had a national leader who was going to address them on that day. And he explained the experiment and why they could no longer continue. And it was just a huge shock because it only took 4 days for this class to become to do these awful things. They turned on each other just with the authority. Same with Milgram. It's just how they responded to authority. Now, these experiments such as these could never be allowed to happen nowadays. There's so much measures in order to protect not only us, but the way our society works. And obviously it's not good to have these sort of thoughts, just these experiments just to bring out the absolute worst in people. Now, I know it's easy to say, oh, I could never do that, or I would never go that far. But it's lucky that you have the luxury to say that you wouldn't, because some people didn't. And that's actually, it's caused trauma that's irreversible. So I say it's better to leave these crazy limits of science to science fiction pages, because we are not written by Mary Shelley, nor do we have to live in like a matrix. We're our own people, and sometimes doing what's right is probably doing what we're already doing. That sometimes we don't need to always know, and to just be happy. Imagine if Adam hadn't eaten the apple. Maybe sometimes it's better to not know.